Hello and welcome to BadgerCam. In this week's video I'm going to be building the Airfix 1/72nd scale Messerschmitt BF 110. Developed as a heavy twin engine fighter, the BF 110 was found to be rather lacking in this role as it lacked the speed and manoeuvrability of the smaller single engine fighters. However, later on in the war it found its niche as a bomber interceptor. Some were fitted with near vertical facing cannons and used to shoot at bombers from below, and in this role they were terrifying and caused a lot of damage on the RAF. Anyway, enough about the plane, let's get into the box. In the box you get full colour instructions and paint guide, the sprues to build the plane, which is always a relief, and decals to build two versions of the plane. First look at the sprues. Everything in these is a odd darker coloured plastic compared to the normal lighter tone that Airfix uses. The plastic seems a bit stiffer and thicker than normal as well. The panel lines are deep though, and the detail looks crisp, and that's what's important. Though as standard there's the normal minor flash to clean up. On to the build. First thing to do is build these oddly shaped pilots. Not the biggest fan of the plastic chaps in this kit. They have big heads, a hole in the back, and awkward fiddly arms to add. I'd rather them have been the normal one-piece figures you get in most of the Airfix kits if I'm honest. But with the aliens built, it's onto the standard cockpit. The cockpit in this is very simple to make and there's not really much detail in there. But as always, you'll hardly see the thing when it's done, so the extra detail will be a waste. Adding the ammo drums to the floor of the cockpit is the most fiddly part to do here, and having a pair of tweezers will really help with adding these bits. Seats added, that completes the main cockpit build. Now time for some pre-painting. For the main cockpit base and sides, I'm using Tamiya neutral grey. Off camera, I've also painted the figures, but they still look like tiny Smurf aliens or something. I've had to tone back the blue, but they still looked a bit odd with their over large heads. Anyway, with the dashboard decal added and the aliens in place, that pretty much concludes the pre-painting at this point. On to the main fuselage. Adding the cockpit into the side was a little bit fiddly, as not really sure how these two parts key into each other, but they kind of go in a fashion and it makes more sense with both sides added. Once you've got the one side glued on though, it's time to add the other side, closing up the two halves. These fit together well, but they have a slight bend to them, so need a little bit of clamping while they dry. Now onto the main wings. Standard three-part construction here, all pretty straightforward, but a few bits to watch out for. The instructions on adding the wheel bay bases twisted my head a little bit, but they only really go in one way, and if you're watching this video it's pretty obvious straight off the bat. The upper wing surfaces as well need a light pinch and or a trim to fit properly, as there's a bit of a tight spot at the wing root. After adding some vents on the underside of the wings, it's time to build the tail area. This is simple to add, but will help if you prop the model up while they're drying, otherwise they end up bending all over the place. Tail on, it's time to move on to the nose. This bit was the most fiddly bit of the whole build. Adding the machine guns through the holes in the nose cone was a bugger, as there's no space to work in there, but if you go at it slow, you get there in the end, and yeah, you really need tweezers to add these bits. Before I move on with the build, it's time for a bit more pre-painting. Painting the wheel wells and landing gear bits in more Tamiya neutral grey, while these bits are easy to get at. Now onto the undercarriage. This bit's simple but delicate to add. Be careful with your line up here, as I nearly put the wheel struts on backwards. Wheels on, it's onto the engine cowlings. Be careful adding the exhausts, as oh yeah, I messed this bit up a bit. The exhaust point up on one side and down on the other side. The upward pointing sides should be on the outside of the engines rather than on the insides, as I've done here. So yeah, watch out for that if you're building this at home. Engine's done though, the plane's really starting to look the part, and the construction stage is pretty much complete, other than adding a few details like the aerials on the base of the plane, the wheels, and the machine gun to the gunner's area. It's at this stage that I decided to add the wheel bay doors to the model. Having no places to key into, these were pretty damn fiddly to fit, but I got there in the end. With the construction done, it's on to the painting. First thing to do is paint the underside in Vallejo RLM 65. As normal, I'm building this up in 3 or 4 thin coats. In future though, I'm thinking of starting to do 5 or 6 thin coats and yeah, get a better effect. But with the undersurface done, it's onto the upper surfaces. This first coat I put down was Vallejo RLM 71, as it's the lighter of the two greens, and then after that moved on to adding Vallejo RLM 70, all these tongue twisters in a row, and had a go at adding the splinter camo on this one freehand, taking my time using a big square brush. I think I did okay, but yeah, it's not as precise as masking, but there was a few awkward angles, so I was a bit put off by masking on this model. Anyway, with the two main shades on the model down, it's time to go on to the panel lines. For the panel lines, I use my normal method of Army Painter strong tone, rubbing the excess along the airflow lines to add a bit of weathering. After adding the panel lines, I gave the whole thing a light dry brush with Vallejo BS Dark Earth and added the exhaust stains using some Army Painter matte black. Painting done, it's time to add the decals. The decals included in this version of the kit were really nice to work with. No silvering, and even without decal fix they seem to mould into the panel lines really well. Anyway, decals on and a light dry brushing to tie everything together later. This is the finished model. I really enjoyed building this kit. The model goes together well, other than the wing roots and nose cone being fiddly bits to build. Care should also be taken on the exhaust, as I found out to my peril. But all in all, it builds into a nice model to complete a World War II collection. I must have shot down this type of plane thousands and thousands of times as in the old Microsoft Combat Flight Simulator as a kid. And throughout the whole build, I almost felt sorry for the thing. Anyway, that's my look at the Airfix 1/72nd scale BF 110. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're thinking of getting one of these yourself, it gives you a good idea of what to expect from the build. Anyway, until next time, look after yourself and have a good one. Goodbye.